and the travelling public will want accountability over this sickening crash. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Well, let's speak to Emma Henderson, former airline captain at EasyJet and founder of the Project Wingman charity. Great to have you on the programme. Just horrific, this, isn't it? That footage, so horrid to watch. What do you think went wrong?
It is horrific to watch, and especially when that's been your job for so many years. And obviously, our condolences and our thoughts are with the people who've lost their lives. And two of those people are pilots. They've done the job I've done. And it's very difficult to watch something like that. But I think one of the things we need to be really careful about, especially in the early days of the aftermath of this terrible incident, is speculating too much on exactly what happened. There are some things we can see. We can see that the aircraft landed with no gear down and no wheels underneath it, and we can see it hit the wall, absolutely. But, you know, what led up to that, we can only know by information that comes from the black box, comes from the cockpit voice recorder, and that the investigation team will piece together and will become apparent as time goes by. And I think that we do need, out of respect for the people who've lost their lives, actually, I think that we need to be a little bit careful to try and guess what must have happened to make that happen.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned those two very important bits of equipment. How quickly do you think we'll get initial results from those boxes?
Well, I understand the black box has been retrieved, or one of the black boxes has been retrieved, and that will be taken away for testing and investigation. It will be being looked at right now. And I don't know, I haven't heard if the cockpit voice recorder has been recovered. I'm assuming that again, making an assumption that will be recovered, and these things can take several days, if not weeks, to get full information from. I would imagine that an initial theory will emerge fairly rapidly. People want answers, and the job of the investigation team is to provide those answers as factually as possible. And in aviation, we deal with facts. We don't deal with what might have happened and speculation. When something happens on board an aircraft, the first thing we do is gather as much factual information as we possibly can. And that's exactly what will happen here.
Yeah, of course. And as you say, you know, important to get that information out accurately, but also quickly as well. You talk about the landing gear and also the flaps, which we know weren't deployed. Could a bird strike cause those two vital bits of equipment to not work?
Well, I think that's one of the questions that a lot of people are asking themselves, is how that could potentially happen, because all passenger aircraft are fitted with more than one system to be able to make the things on board that they need work. And one of those safety critical things is landing gear. So there is more than one hydraulic system, for example, on an aircraft to make that equipment work. So, you know, it's very difficult to know whether or not something like that could cause the landing gear to fail. But of course, we've had in the past the miracle on the Hudson. You know, that was a multiple bird strike down both engines, and, you know, situations that we couldn't have possibly imagined in the past have taken place that a subsequent investigation was able to help us to piece together. And that's the same thing that will happen here. In theory, yes, it's possible that hydraulic lines could have been ruptured by multiple birds hitting an aircraft, in theory. But again, it's speculation. We can't possibly know. Yes, it's possible in theory, but the aircraft had already made one approach to come into land. It had already gone around to make another approach at the other end of the runway. So you kind of have to think that at some point this equipment was all working on board. So there are more questions than answers at the moment. And I think without the knowledge of what's on the black box and what's on the cockpit voice recorder, it's a bit like it's a bit like self-diagnosing a medical condition on Google. You know, it's you're trying to piece together bits of a jigsaw puzzle when you don't really understand how they all fit together.
Yeah, and all we have is sort of one piece of video footage, isn't it, to sort of try and make those assumptions. What we do know is that there was this very big concrete wall which the aircraft obviously went into. How common are those walls? I think they're called jet blast walls, aren't they? Is that something that every airport of a certain size will have, or is it something that some airports have, or indeed that are the different variations? Because I don't think they're always thick concrete, are they?
It's not something I've ever seen before. My flying was limited to short-haul European, so I've not flown worldwide. It's not something I've seen before. It is something of a surprise that that's there, because there is usually something called a clearway at the end of a runway that is literally what it says on the tin. It's a piece of land that is clear of any obstructions, and that has to be there to meet ICAO rules. So that is something that is going to be a question, of course, that's going to come up in the investigation as to why that was there and whether or not it should have been.
And of course, as a pilot yourself, you know, you'll be watching that landing thinking, on the one hand, it was a pretty good landing, given that he had no wheels. He came in very smoothly, didn't he? But it was just impossible for him to slow down.
Absolutely. And when I first saw the footage, actually, I obviously heard what had happened, and I saw the footage and thought, gosh, they're coming in very fast, and didn't initially realise that there wasn't landing gear down, or that if it was down, it hadn't fully deployed. So my first thought was how fast it was, and I wondered why it wasn't slowing down, and then, of course, realised what was happening. And yeah, absolutely. Right up until that moment, it looked as if it was something that was not exactly going to plan. It was clearly something that had gone terribly wrong in the first place. But the landing itself looked like it was something that was being done by a very talented and skillful pilot.
Yeah, we know he had almost 7,000 hours of flying experience. What about the length of the runway, Emma? 2,800 metres long. Is that an issue for an aircraft like this?
Not really, no. I mean, as you said earlier on, it's shorter than the runway at Gatwick, but then I live up near Inverness, which is much shorter than that. And I've landed a fully loaded Airbus A320 on that runway many times. So with a normally working aircraft with a full braking system, doesn't have any problems getting in. We always do performance calculations, of course, but a normal working aircraft wouldn't have any problems landing somewhere like that. At what point they realised that this aircraft wasn't going to be normally working, and whether or not there was time to make a decision to go somewhere else, is again something that we will only know in the fullness of time once the investigations have been carried out. But I wouldn't look at a runway like that and worry about its length, for sure.
No, so that's perhaps not an issue. And of course, a go-around, as it's called, many people may think that is incredibly rare, but actually they're quite common, aren't they, where a pilot is told at the last minute to abort the landing and go again?
Yeah, it's not unusual at all, and it's something that has happened many times over my career. In fact, most pilots, we don't actually assume we're going to make a successful landing. We assume that that our approach is going to result in a go-around, because then we're prepared for it. And it's not unusual at all. You know, I've come into Gatwick before and been asked by air traffic control to perform a go-around because the preceding aircraft has hit a bird and the debris needs to be cleared off the runway before we can make a safe landing. So it's quite a normal part. Quite a normal part of a procedure that we don't use every day.
Well, as you said at the beginning of this conversation, our thoughts, of course, with the families of all those who have been killed in this tragedy, and we will find out in the fullness of time exactly what happened. But for now, thank you very much, Captain Emma Henderson. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.